At some point, almost everyone meets the same strange night. The room is dark, the world is quiet, and yet your mind is louder than traffic. You replay a conversation from months ago as if it happened 5 minutes ago. You draft an apology you will never send. You imagine a future disaster with such detail it feels like memory. And the most unsettling part is this: you can feel your own body paying the price for thoughts that haven't even happened. Heart tight, stomach hollow, breath shallow. In that moment, you're not just thinking. You're trapped inside a private theater where the screen won't go black and the same scene keeps returning. Different costumes, same dread. You tell yourself, stop, calm down, think positive. But the mind doesn't obey. The harder you push the thoughts away, more they multiply, like shadows that grow longer when you chase them with light. And then a new fear sneaks in, almost quietly. If I'm not strong enough to handle my own mind. Here's the problem beneath the problem. Overthinking isn't simply thinking too much. It's thinking without resolution, thinking without action, thinking without truth. It's the mind trying to produce certainty in a world that refuses to offer it. It's the mind trying to rehearse every possible pain so it can finally feel safe. But safety is never granted by imagination. When we try to stop overthinking by ignoring our feelings, we create a second prison. We become numb on purpose. We treat sadness like a flaw, anxiety like an enemy, grief like an inconvenience. We swallow what we feel, and we call it control. Yet the ignored emotion doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. It becomes irritability. It becomes exhaustion. It becomes distance from the people we love. It becomes a life that looks fine from the outside and feels quietly unbearable on the inside. The Stoics saw this pattern centuries ago, before modern psychology gave it names. They watched the human mind do what it still does today: confuse impressions with reality, confuse emotion with destiny, confuse thought with necessity. Epictetus said that people are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them, by the event itself, but by the meaning we attach, the story we build, the verdict we deliver in our own minds. Overthinking is often a courtroom that never adjourns. The prosecution is relentless. The defense is exhausted. The judge is biased. The sentence is always anxiety. But a Stoic would ask you something that feels almost offensive when you're in pain. If the mind is not the master you think it is, what if your thoughts are not orders, but visitors? What if you could learn to welcome the feeling without obeying the story? Because the real aim is not to become unfeeling. The aim is to become unshakably clear. Imagine you're standing near the ocean at dusk. A wave rises and crashes. You don't accuse the wave of being dramatic. You don't argue with it. You don't demand it be calm so you can feel comfortable. You simply recognize it. A wave is here. Emotions are like that, natural movements of the inner sea. Overthinking begins when you see the wave and then build a mythology around it. This wave means I'm failing. This wave means I'm unlovable. This wave means something is wrong with me. The Stoics would tell you the wave is just a wave. The feeling is just a feeling. The meaning is where the suffering compounds. And yet, this is important, Stoicism is not denial. The Stoics never asked you to pretend you don't feel. Marcus Aurelius did not write as a man untouched by sorrow. Seneca did not write as someone immune to fear. They wrote as men learning to live with the weather of the soul without letting it dictate the direction of the ship. The goal is not the absence of emotion. The goal is the presence of wisdom while emotion moves through you. So if you want to stop overthinking without ignoring your feelings, you need a new relationship with both. Not a war, not suppression. A relationship where feelings are allowed to speak, but not to govern. One where thoughts are heard, but not blindly believed. Where you become the calm witness in your own mind, the one who can say, "I see what's happening," and remain free enough to choose what happens next. Overthinking usually begins with a simple sensation, a tightness, a heaviness, a restlessness that you can't quite name. And then the mind rushes in, desperate to explain it. The mind says, "This must mean something. Let's find the cause. Let's solve it right now." It combs through the past like a detective hunting for evidence. It scans the future like a radar searching for threats. It pulls memories out of storage and holds them up to the light, looking for hidden messages. But here's the quiet truth. The mind is not searching for truth as much as it is searching for relief. Overthinking is often a form of emotional bargaining. If I can just figure it out, I won't have to feel it. But feeling is not a problem to be solved. Feeling is information to be understood. A Stoic would tell you that the first moment of emotion is often involuntary. The body reacts before the mind can produce a philosophy. Your pulse rises, your face warms, your throat tightens. This initial surge is not a moral failure. It's a human reflex, an ancient system designed to keep you alive. The Stoics called these first movements impressions. They arrive like a knock at the door. You don't choose the knock. What you choose, this is where freedom begins, is whether you open the door and invite the impression to move in as a permanent resident. Overthinking happens when the impression enters and then you hand it the keys. The mind says, "This feeling is proof. Proof that something bad is coming. Proof that you are unsafe. Proof that you are about to be rejected. Proof that you made a mistake you will never recover from." The feeling becomes evidence in a case you didn't even know you were prosecuting. Take a common example. You send a message to someone important. Hours pass, no reply, a simple fact. But inside you, a sensation rises, uncertainty, maybe a pinch of fear. Then the mind begins its performance. They're ignoring me. I said something wrong. They don't respect me. This always happens. Too much. I'm not enough. Soon you are not waiting for a reply. You are reliving every moment you ever felt unwanted. The original event was small. The story becomes enormous. The feeling becomes unbearable, not because the world is unbearable, because your mind turned one unanswered message into a prophecy. The Stoic approach is not to shame yourself for this. It's to notice the mechanism. The Stoics were practical engineers of the inner life. They would say, observe the sequence: impression, judgment, emotion, action. Suffering often increases not from the impression, but from the judgment. The mind isn't just reporting, it's interpreting. Interpretation can be trained. Here's where many people get stuck. They hear, "Your judgments cause your suffering," and they think it means, "So I should just think differently." But think differently is too vague to help at 2 a.m. when your chest is tight and your mind is racing. You need something more grounded, more bodily, more real. Start here. Overthinking is frequently an attempt to outrun a feeling. The mind runs because stillness would mean meeting the emotion directly. And meeting the emotion can feel like stepping into deep water. So you pace at the shoreline of thought, endlessly, until you're exhausted. What would it look like to step into the water, slowly, with dignity? It would look like naming what is actually present without a story. Not, "I'm going to lose everything." Not, "I'm a failure." Just, feel anxious. I feel ashamed. I feel lonely. I feel grief. This is not a trick of positive thinking. It is an act of honesty. Honesty has a stabilizing power. When you name a feeling, you reduce the fog. You stop fighting a monster made of smoke and begin addressing something real. Then comes the deeper Stoic move, separating the feeling from the verdict. Anxiety is a sensation. Catastrophe is a conclusion. Sadness is a wave. Hopelessness is a narrative. The feeling is the body's weather. The narrative is the mind's interpretation. You can respect the weather without letting it decide your route. This is where the philosophy becomes almost cinematic in its clarity. You begin to see that your mind is not one voice. It is a crowd. Some voices are wise, some are frightened, some are bitter, some are trying to protect you with old strategies that no longer fit your life. Overthinking is what happens when the loudest voice wins by volume instead of truth. Stoicism teaches you to stop letting volume decide. So you listen, you don't surrender. You acknowledge, but you don't obey. You might say to yourself, quietly, as if speaking to a worried friend, "Of course I feel this. Something uncertain is happening. My mind wants control. My body wants safety. That's human." And then, with the calm strength of a person who refuses to abandon themselves, "But I do not need to solve my entire life tonight." That sentence alone can change the temperature in the room. Because the deepest fuel for overthinking is urgency. The belief that if you don't resolve everything immediately, you will be destroyed. Stoicism dismantles that urgency with a single, steady question. Is actually required of me right now? Not what might be required in 6 months. Not what my worst-case scenario demands. Right now, in this hour, in this breath. This is how you stop overthinking without ignoring your feelings. You stop trying to become someone who never feels. You become someone who can feel without panicking, someone who can feel and still choose. There is a moment, small, almost invisible. The mind can be redirected. The Stoics called it assent. The instant you decide whether to agree with the thought that arrived. People don't realize there is a decision. They think thoughts are facts. Stoicism teaches you to pause at the gate. Picture your mind as a city. Arrive like travelers. Some come with useful tools. Some come with rumors. Some come with fear disguised as wisdom. Your job is not to burn the gates down. Your job is to check their papers. So when a thought says, "This will end badly," you don't need to argue with it for an hour. You don't need to force it to disappear. You simply ask, is this thought certain? Is it a prediction? Is it within my control or outside it? Is it demanding an action or demanding a panic? The dichotomy of control is the Stoic blade that cuts overthinking at its root. There are things you can influence and things you cannot. Your effort, your choices, your values, your next step, these are yours. Other people's reactions, the past, the random turns of life, these are not. Overthinking is often the mind, trying to control what cannot be controlled, and then punishing you for failing at the impossible. Bring it down to earth with an example that actually happens in real lives. You're worried about a medical test. You're waiting on results. Spins. It shows you images of hospital rooms. It writes speeches you might have to give. It imagines the faces of your family. It even tries to plan your grief in advance, as if grief can be scheduled and managed. A Stoic would not tell you, "Don't care." A Stoic would tell you, "Care properly. Care about what you can do. Follow up. Ask questions. Take the next responsible step. Rest your body. Speak honestly to someone you trust." Then, when the mind demands certainty about the outcome, you answer with disciplined humility. Part is not mine to command. This is not resignation. This is liberation. But what about feelings? About the ache in the chest while you wait? You don't ignore it. You give it a place to exist without turning it into prophecy. You might sit down and let yourself feel afraid, not as a failure, but as a human being facing the unknown. You breathe slowly enough to show your nervous system there is no immediate threat in this room, in this moment. You treat your own fear with the respect you would give someone else's fear. You don't shame it. You don't dramatize it. You simply allow it to pass through you like a visitor, not like an emperor. Overthinking often pretends to be productive. It wears a suit. It speaks in what-ifs that sound responsible. But if you look closely, the mind is usually doing one of two things: replaying the past or kidnapping the future. And both are a refusal to stand in the present. The Stoics were relentlessly present because they believed the present was always pleasant, but because they knew it was the only place where choice exists. The past is locked. The future is not yet here. Your power lives in the present like a candle in a dark room. Overthinking is the wind that tries to blow it out by pulling your attention everywhere else. So here is a practice, simple, not easy, that can change your inner life over time. When you notice the spiral, don't ask, "How do I stop thinking?" Ask, "Is the next honest action?" If there is a next step you can take it, even if it's small. Send the email. Make the appointment. Apologize. Drink water. Go for a walk. Write down the plan. Overthinking shrinks when action returns you to reality. And when there is no action to take, you are waiting. When the outcome is outside your hands, then you practice something even more powerful. You practice endurance with awareness. You practice being with uncertainty without trying to anesthetize yourself with mental noise. This is where Stoicism feels almost like quiet heroism, because anyone can be calm when life is predictable. It takes strength to sit with a feeling you cannot fix tonight and still remain gentle with yourself. There is also a subtle trap people fall into when they hear Stoic advice. They try to logic their way out of emotion. They turn Stoicism into a cold courtroom where feelings are dismissed as irrational. But Stoicism, at its best, is not cold. It is warm with clarity. It does not deny that you feel. It simply refuses to let feeling become a tyrant. Try this inner dialogue when you feel overwhelmed. I feel anxious. What is the anxious mind claiming? It is claiming danger. Is there immediate danger in this room? If not, I can let the body settle. The feeling can be here, and I can still be safe. Then, gently, you challenge the thought not by fighting it, by asking it to become precise. Overthinking thrives on vagueness. It says, everything is going wrong. A Stoic asks, exactly is going wrong right now. Overthinking says, I can't handle this. A Stoic asks, what part specifically? I'm afraid I can't handle. When you make the fear specific, it becomes measurable. When it becomes measurable, it becomes workable. It becomes workable. The mind no longer needs to spin in circles. Another Stoic tool is negative visualization, often misunderstood. It's not about torturing yourself with worst-case scenarios. It's about rehearsing reality with dignity. It's the difference between panic and preparedness. You calmly consider, if the thing I fear happens, what virtues will I need? Patience, courage, temperance, wisdom. You stop asking for a guarantee of comfort, and you start building a guarantee of character. And character is the one thing life cannot take from you without your cooperation. This is how you stop overthinking without ignoring your feelings. You stop begging the world to be predictable, and you start becoming someone who can meet unpredictability with a steady soul. Let's go deeper, because the most difficult overthinking isn't about daily stress. It's about the wounds that return when you least expect them. The relationship that ended, and your mind replays the last argument like a ritual of self-punishment. The mistake you made years ago, that still visits you in the shower. The moment you felt humiliated, and you can still hear the laughter in your head, even if no one else remembers. These are not just thoughts, they are pain looking for meaning. A Stoic would not mock this pain. They would ask you to look at it with the eyes of someone who wants to heal rather than reopen the wound. Overthinking the past is often a disguised attempt to rewrite it. The mind is trying to go back and edit reality so it hurts less. The past cannot be edited. It can only be integrated. What does integration look like? It looks like admitting what happened, admitting what you feel about it, and then making a clear distinction between regret and identity. You can regret what you did without becoming a person defined by it. You can grieve what you lost without turning loss into a life sentence. You can feel shame without bowing to it as truth. Marcus Aurelius wrote about meeting his own mind like a companion, sometimes stubborn, sometimes restless. That's what you learn to do. You become your own companion, not your own bully, not your own interrogator. A companion who says, yes, yes, that mattered, and we are still here. There is a particular kind of overthinking that masquerades as self-improvement. It says, if I analyze myself enough, I'll finally become worthy. It turns your life into a project and your soul into a spreadsheet. Worthiness is not something you earn by perfecting your thoughts. Worthiness is a recognition of being human. Stoicism doesn't ask you to become perfect. It asks you to become aligned with reason, with virtue, with what is truly yours to control. A mature mind begins to understand this paradox. Feelings must be felt, but not followed blindly. Thoughts must be heard, but not worshipped. The mind is a tool, not a temple. So when emotion rises, you do not rush to silence it. You sit with it long enough to learn what it's pointing to. Maybe your anxiety is telling you that you need boundaries. Maybe your sadness is telling you that you care deeply. Maybe your anger is telling you that something feels unjust. Emotions often carry a message. They deliver it in a language that can be exaggerated and dramatic. Your job is to translate, not to obey. This translation is where wisdom lives. It helps to remember overthinking is often a form of fear wearing the mask of intelligence. It wants to keep you busy so you don't have to be brave, because bravery doesn't live in mental rehearsals. Bravery lives in the first real step you take while still afraid. You might be overthinking a conversation you need to have. The mind wants to plan every sentence, anticipate every reaction, avoid every discomfort. Life rarely follows the script. Stoicism invites you to focus on what you can control. Speak honestly, speak respectfully, stay calm, accept the other person's response. If you do your part, the rest belongs to fate. Not because fate is kind, because fate is simply not yours to command. At some point, you realize the secret. You don't need to win against your mind. You need to stop making it your enemy. You need to stop treating every anxious thought like a fire alarm. Some thoughts are just noise. Some feelings are just weather. You can let them exist without turning them into commandments. And when you practice this repeatedly, you begin to feel something rare in modern life: internal space. A small distance between you and your thoughts. A pause where you can breathe. A silence where you can choose. That space is freedom. Now imagine a different night. The same darkness, the same quiet. The old spiral tries to begin. Worry enters. A familiar ache follows. But this time you recognize the first movement. You don't panic. You sit up. Maybe you place a hand on your chest, and you say, almost like a vow, I will not abandon myself tonight. You let the feeling be there. You don't drown it in distractions. You don't force it into a corner. You let it sit beside you like a tired traveler. And you ask it, gently, it needs. Often it needs nothing but permission to exist. Often it needs rest. Often it needs you to stop treating it like a scandal. You turn to the mind, the storyteller, and you ask for truth. Not comfort, not certainty. Truth. You examine the thought that is driving the spiral. You notice its tone, its assumptions, its exaggerations. You separate what you know from what you fear. You separate facts from predictions. You separate your responsibility from your obsession. And then, like a Stoic, you return to the smallest unit of power. You possess the next choice. Maybe the next choice is to write for 5 minutes, not to solve your life, but to empty the mind onto paper so it stops looping. Maybe the next choice is to breathe slowly and count your exhales until your body believes you. Maybe the next choice is to remind yourself, can handle discomfort. I don't need to escape it. Maybe the next choice is to sleep, not because everything is resolved, because rest is an act of wisdom. Overthinking fades when you stop demanding that your feelings vanish before you move forward. You move forward with them. Like walking through fog, you don't wait for it to clear, you walk anyway, step by step, trusting that clarity comes from motion. A Stoic life is not a life without pain. It is a life where pain is met with dignity, uncertainty is met with steadiness, where emotions are treated as natural events, not personal failures, where thoughts are held lightly, tested carefully, and never mistaken for fate. And there is one more layer, perhaps the most profound. Overthinking often comes from the illusion that you must understand everything to be at peace. But peace does not require complete understanding. Peace requires right relationship. Right relationship with what you can control. Right relationship with what you cannot. Relationship with your own inner weather. The world will always be larger than your plans. People will always be more complex than your assumptions. Life will always contain randomness. Stoicism is not a promise that these things will change. It is a promise that you can change how you meet them. So the next time you feel your mind racing, don't ask for the impossible task of never thinking again. Ask for the noble task of thinking well, thinking with clarity, thinking with humility, thinking in a way that leads to action or acceptance, not endless loops. And if this message resonates, if you want more calm, cinematic Stoic clarity like this, take a moment to support the channel, the video, so more people who are quietly struggling can find it. Subscribe if you want weekly guidance for a steadier mind. Comment what overthinking steals from you most: sleep, peace, confidence, relationships, so you can name it clearly and begin taking it back. Then, return to yourself. Return to this breath. Let the mind do what minds do, and let the heart do what hearts do, without making either your ruler. Because in the end, the most Stoic freedom is simple and gentle: to feel fully, to think clearly, and to choose your next step with quiet courage, again and again, until life, in all its uncertainty, becomes something you can meet with a steady soul.